Welcome to 365 Brothers, the podcast. I'm your host, Robin Shine. I am delighted to bring to you brothers from across the United States and from various professions talking about their life experiences, their wisdom, and a conversation that also touches on racial profiling in the United States, how pervasive it is, what the impact is. And remember, you can follow us on Instagram at 365 Brothers. Also, follow us on Facebook at 365 Brothers, the podcast. If this is your first time listening to a 365 Brothers episode, make sure you subscribe because you do not want to miss one brother's wisdom, one brother's experience, and their perspective on life in the United States. Today, we're speaking to a gentleman who works in the information technology industry. He's got a ton of certifications. He's got an AAS, and he also has BS from University of Phoenix, which he got in computer sciences and networking. He's also the founder and CEO of Nxus Cloud, which is a managed services provider. So if you need some IT tech, this is the gentleman to call. His family immigrated from Jamaica, and he was raised in New York City. Today, we are speaking with Marvin Smith. Welcome, Marvin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a privilege. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the listeners to help them get to know you better?
Like you already stated, Jamaican born, came to the US when I was 8. Just very motivated individual, hardworking, which pretty much all of us are in certain ways, just very driven to accomplish.
Got that. As we approach 130 Brothers interview today, it has been exciting to talk to brothers who just shatter so many stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
And, being driven and motivated, like that is something that I think we all know. We've heard, if you're Black, you have to be twice as good, you have to work twice as hard. But It's just like we say it like a cliche, right? Mm-hmm. Versus really getting how much Black men are driven and work hard, right?
Yes.
And so, I just wanted to just take it from the cliche of that to the, we mean on the court, working hard and getting it done.
Yes.
Anything you wanted to say on that? Sound like you were.
No, it's just very true. We say it as a cliche, but when we tell it to people, I don't believe they truly understand what it is. It's something that's in us where we've got to work twice as hard. We've got to show them that we're much more than what they see on TV and things like that. So,
and I love that you added much more than what they see on TV, because, we spoke briefly yesterday and I told you that I was taking a friend, they've been friends for a long term, taking them out for their 40th wedding anniversary. And I've had the privilege of knowing them 30 years of their marriage. And we had a conversation about the stereotypes that are out there that, in particular, the wife, as I was talking to her about things with the podcast, she commented about how even now, when she sees a Black man rolling a stroller, for example, she's kind of like, oh, look at that one. You know what I'm saying? It's like pointing to how deeply ingrained these stereotypes are. And that's just around Black men aren't fathers, right? Like they're absent. They don't do those things.
Correct.
And so I love that you mentioned, the stereotypes that come from television, because those, I think when people just take it as a cliche, it's because they don't realize that Black people of any gender, but in particular, the stereotypes around Black men, that there's a constant going up against that because it's so often right there for people,
Exactly.
So, yeah, thank you for bringing that in. Let's get into the question. So let's start with, what is a favorite song or movie, either for right now or all time?
This movie came out when I was around 6 years old, but being a tech guy and a car guy, this movie is like the perfect balance of both. It's called The Wraith. Came out 1968. I was pretty much 6, still growing up. But it describes when somebody dies from a very vengeful act something done wrong to them, the spirit vengeful spirit comes back. But this spirit is in the form of a car that's fully teched out. So it's kind of like the perfect blend of sci-fi and cars and tech in it.
Okay,
So
you got to spell the name of this movie because I don't think I've seen it.
sure. Full title is The Wraith, THEWRATH.
The Wraith.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. WRAIT. Nope, haven't seen it. I don't even think I've heard. When did this come out?
I was still a kid, but when I first saw it for the first time, I just fell in love. It was just like that perfect balance of cars and tech, and it had a good story. Something happened to a good person, and then a vengeful spirit comes back in the form of a teched out car, and they have to make the wrong right. And yeah.
Okay, see, now that's on my list. I'm gonna have to go check that out.
Okay.
Because I love sci-fi, that and psychological thrillers. And so I'm just like dumbfounded that I have not even heard of this movie. Like as if I should know every movie, right? But anyway, I can't wait to check that out. Thank you for sharing that. And it reminds me, I loved Transformers too, which is, it's sci-fi, but funny, not a thriller per se. But so this sounds like Transformers, but with the other side.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, cool. Let's talk about memories from childhood. What is a favorite moment from your childhood?
This memory was when I saw my first computer. I went over to my uncle's house, and he showed me this pale white big screen keyboard, and I was like, what is this? He was like, this is a computer. And I spent that entire weekend just seeing how this thing works, playing around with it. I believe at that time it was running Windows 98. So I was pretty much into this thing from Friday to Sunday. And I was really bummed when I had to go back home. It was like, don't worry, it's here. You could come anytime and play around with it. So that memory kind of stuck with me as I got into the IT field and as I became an adult.
Now, did you say this was an uncle?
Yes, this was an uncle of mine.
A computer back then, for people who don't know, it was expensive. Like, yes, very expensive. I think I bought my first laptop, in 96, I want to say 95, 96, somewhere in there, maybe 97. And it was $3,600.
Wow. Yeah.
And I bring that up because for your uncle to let you get on this computer and just play on it, like back then, they were pricey. That wasn't just like a little $300. Hey, look, I got my latest upgraded computer. Go have fun with it. So that is pretty awesome.
Yeah, wow. Definitely. He was in the banking field, so when he brought this thing home, it was just like, it wasn't any kind of, oh, it's expensive. It was like, hey, go ahead, play around with it, see how it works. Let your curiosity run. So it was a very good memory that shaped my life.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, let's talk about accomplishments. Given the field that you're in and that being one of your favorite first memories, we get that you love tech. But I know that you have many accomplishments. And this question I asked for two. The first is the accomplishment that means the most to you personally. And then the accomplishment that is the one that when told or when people hear it, they go, oh, or wow, it's the one that most likely gets that response. So let's start with the first. Which accomplishment is the one that of all of them means the most to you personally?
The one that means the most was pretty much when I finished my associates, because I believe at that time it was when a lot of people in the New York City area, they graduated high school, but they didn't know what they wanted to do with their life. A lot of people were looking to not go to college. So I look at it as a personal accomplishment because I stuck it out. Regardless of how hard the class were, how tough the professors were, I stuck it out. I maintained discipline, maintain class. And even at that point, I was working a part-time job. So it feels good to me that I accomplished that first step into, a long career. So that actually means the most to me.
And you received your bachelor's from the University of Phoenix, right?
Yes, correct.
Now, did you do that online or in person?
It was a twofold. I did certain classes online, and then I went to the campus in Jersey City.
Okay, because I'm hearing that there were some tough spots there, right? Because you point out the sticking to it. So what was one of the difficulties you had to overcome, just so listeners can get a sense of that?
So even the fact that I was very into computers growing up, learning how they work is a whole different ball game. Learning this is what a circuit board is. These are the protocols that require a computer to communicate with each other. Those were kind of the tough points, because I had to kind of get out of that curiosity phase and say, oh, this is how things work. I need to understand these are the protocols. This is what a CPU is, and this is what it controls on a computer board. So for the average listener, they may see a computer on their desk, but they have no idea how it works or how it communicates with their Wi-Fi. Me, I had to learn all of that. And most professors at that stage, they're pretty much, hey, we're cramming so much information down your throat. If you choose to hold on to it, assimilate it, it's up to you. If you choose not to, it was good having you as a student, but it was,
I got it.
yeah.
It's like we're providing it, and it's on you to make the most of it.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. So I stuck with it. I became good at it. I became my knowledge increased on how the computers work, how it works back at a server. Yeah. So all those things I pretty much forced myself to learn, and I completed and graduated.
Yeah. And you may not recall this, but in that kind of program, is there a high attrition rate, or is it, it's pretty much once you're accepted into the program, you're, most of the people who started finish?
It was actually a double major also. So even though you were accepted into the program, a lot of people didn't really last because, and plus it was a really tough course. Not a lot of people get enrolled into the course. So you're being, bombarded with so much detail, so much information. Not everybody actually passes the class and actually gets the degree.
I appreciate you sharing that additional insight into it, because, computers have been and continue to be one of the fastest growing careers out there. And I know I'm always encouraging my students that, if you don't already have a passion for something and you are still looking to see, it's like you may want to test that out, because that's where we're headed. That's where we are, and it's where we're going to be for a while.
Exactly.
But to say that does not convey what it looks like to go into that field, and the amount of knowledge consumed and assimilated in order to be effective in that profession. So I appreciate you giving us a little inside picture.
You're welcome.
And what about the accomplishment that is the one that when others hear it, they're most likely to go, oh, or wow?
I don't want to say this is an accomplishment that's going to wow people, but just being the fact that I went on to get another degree and I was able to pay back most of my student loans before they were due. I mean, I know that doesn't sound.
No, that's a big deal.
When we hear the narrative of, oh, I've got too much student loan debts and things like that. Yes, that's a cause for concern, but at the same time, you kind of chose that path. You chose to go into a career or go into expensive college. It's really on you to pay that back. No one's going to pay it for you. They say they'll pay it for you, but at the end of the day, it's pretty much up to you to pay it back.
Yeah, which
I hear you, and I can't. I have to be honest with you. I hear you, and then part of me, I'm not really big on pushing back against guests because I'm grateful you're here. But I have to say, when you're 18 or 19, you may not understand, right? Like I remember, because I went straight from high school to Stanford, and I got to tell you, I did not really get when I signed on the dotted line. I did not fully appreciate how much I was saying I'm going to be paying back, year after year after year after year, plus deferment for, pursuing a different career. But I do hear what you're saying, which is, okay, well, never mind if you fully understood it or not. There is always an opportunity to take it, to do what you have to do to get them paid back. And ultimately, whether you knew or not, same with a credit card, even if you don't go to college, you take out a credit card and then a couple more and then a few others, you're still responsible for that debt no matter what. At least with an education, you got something. But, unless you go into classics, in which case, I'm sorry, nobody told you. Actually, that's not true. Nowadays, there's something, you can do something with everything. So anyway, but that's a big deal. So now I just have to follow up and ask, how did you do that?
It comes down to kind of my upbringing. I saw the benefits of what dedication and hard work could get you from my mother. Pretty much, she was a home health aide. So it was pretty much rain, sleet, or snow. She would have to get up, go to these houses where she took care of people. She got pride out of it, but at the same time, I saw what hard work and dedication could bring to the table.
So that's kind of philosophy behind how you did it, but how did you do it?
Just basically worked 2 or 3 jobs to pay off my student loans, and that was it.
Wow. So even though you had a college degree, you basically just you didn't go, well, look, this is my degree. I got my degree job. You went on and took on additional work.
Yes.
Just like, And I have to ask you this because I kind of joked about it yesterday, but really this is more my curiosity, and I'm willing to be embarrassed. I was in my 20s, I think, when the TV show In Living Color came out, right? And so they had this segment where they would have, it was a Jamaican family, right? And then everybody's got 2, 3, 4 jobs, and they would like totally exaggerate and say 10 jobs and whatever, right? Okay. So I just wanted to know for myself, was that offensive?
Not to me, because again, I grew up around that. So it is true that Jamaicans have multiple jobs, because that's pretty much kind of like our DNA. We've got to constantly survive because where we're from. But it wasn't offensive. I didn't find it offensive. I found it funny because, again, you could do a joke in a way where it's a good compliment, or you could do it in a way where it's offensive. I found it to be a good compliment.
Yeah, I thought it was like, dang, that's getting it done. Commitment, right? I bring that up just because, for me, I think I bring it up because it was my first exposure to a distinct subgroup of African American here in the United States, and they went through pains to distinguish that work ethic through comedy. And the first time they did it, I was like, okay, they stupid. And then when they did it a couple more and it was like an ongoing segment, I was like, are you saying people really do that? Because, my family was a kind of a one job family, and, that's what you do. And I think, though, that now I think it's much more common with the gig economy today.
Exactly. Yes.
More millennials understand it than, say, for sure, than baby boomers and more than Generation X, millennials, and the generation behind them, Gen Z. I think that's going to become more of an American norm for many,
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about favorite words. What is a favorite quote, saying, metaphor, or book, and why?
The quote is a Latin quote. It's called Carpe Diem. Basically translated, it means seize the day. I feel like that phrase alone kind of sums up who I am. Like every day I wake up, I've got to accomplish something new and just basically seize the day. because tomorrow is not guaranteed. So every day you wake up, you just have to go full force and go forward.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's go into some more experiences you've had. What is a conversation, moment, or event that either changed the trajectory of your life or it had a significant impact on your life?
Going back before college, I was in junior high school. I was in art class. And again, another exposure to computers. It was a few of us I could remember. I was on the computer don't remember exactly, but I remember what my art teacher said to the entire class. And it felt like she was talking to me directly, but she said, you guys should get into computers because it's going to run the world. And from that moment when she said that, that's when the light kind of went off and said, okay, this is what I need to do. Even from before going into college, it was kind of just that light going off. And
Wow.
Here we are today. Computers do run the world.
They really do.
Everything runs on from a computer to a server, and here we are.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was your art teacher.
That was my art teacher. Yes.
I love it. Were you guys even using computers in their art class at that time?
We weren't using it for anything graphical. It was just, I think the school maybe bought a few computers and they put one in the art class.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I remember that era.
So I would pretty much, I was on it. I believe at that point, it wasn't graphical. It was just DOS. I was just there playing around with DOS, and a few of us were doing something else. And the teacher said, you guys should get into computers. It's going to run the world.
Yeah. I love that it was an art teacher. Because I am an educator, and I do like to think that regardless of our area of expertise, that we're able to encourage students wherever their interests lie, Yeah. And so I love that story. And as you're talking and you're mentioning how computers run the world, I just wonder for you as someone who's into IT, is there any place where you see computers or a particular way that computers are used that even for you, you're like, wow, I can't believe computers are even there?
Computers are actually helping run in cities. Because when you think about a city, you're thinking about buildings, streets, but actually behind the scenes, computers are running the electricity that flows under the city. They're controlling the water that flows through the city underneath in the pipes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that, to me, like that whole concept of a computer running an entire city, because there's so many aspects of a city that I didn't even talk about, but computers are there helping running a city. And I just find that fascinating.
The one that got me was when, out here in Southern California, there are certain areas that are so dense in terms of need for parking. And that, you can sign up for apps that will track and tell you when you're more likely to find a parking space, like what times to go. And then not only what times to go, but you can sign up for an app that'll tell you when, a space is available or which one is coming up. And
exactly.
I'm just like, whoa, like that networking it's serious, man. It is serious. Yeah.
I think at one point we're going to come to where, I know one car manufacturer has this, where the car could actually park itself. But I think this is going to become standard in all automobiles. Let's say you go to your favorite restaurant, you can't find a spot. That car will circle around the restaurant or circle around the block till it finds a perfect spot. And then when you're ready to leave, you just summon your car and it comes out of that spot and comes right up front and is there to pick you up. So it's we're headed on a good path, I feel, but we haven't seen anything yet.
Okay, that one blew my mind. It shouldn't, because I know there's self-driving cars, but
Yeah.
it never occurred to me like that. Yeah, the next level application of
Yeah.
self-driving vehicles is, you're in a hurry. The dinner party started at 7, it's already 7:30, and it's like there's no parking to be found. You've already circled the block 10 times.
Yeah.
And you just go ahead, get out, set it on, go find a park.
Exactly.
And the impact that has on jobs, because let's say in 10 years, that's standard. Well,
Yeah.
then in 15 to 20 years, valet parking is not going to be a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It
you
is.
know? And they could even just have a lot where, I mean, just taking what you just said, it's like I could see where you get to a point where, let's say you pull into a hotel that's valet parking only.
Uh-huh.
They just, give something that they like a QR code. You scan it into your computer, your car's computer, and the car takes itself to the parking and parks wherever it needs to be. And then they don't have to worry about dings or anything. Dang,
Exactly.
this is that's cool.
Yeah.
Sort of. Wow, excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, what is a moment that either highlights or in some way signifies your experience as a Black man in the United States?
I would say we hear that narrative, the first two type of thing, first ever.
Oh.
When it comes to something that I feel prideful for is the late great General Colin Powell, who was born to Jamaican immigrants, who became the first African-American 4-star general, also the first African-American 4-star general to be on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, I'm a bit of a military nerd, but when you're on the level of a Joint Chief of Staff, like you're the chairman, you're basically telling the other branches of military what to do. So again, another Black man who's also born to Jamaican parents, got worked up the ranks, became a 4-star general, and became the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Right. And then later Secretary of Defense. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I mean, Joint Chiefs already huge, like you said, which is, as a military buff, I get why you're like, no, that's the one. But, but also, to join the cabinet at that rank.
Exactly.
As you bring that up, I will share that when I originally conceived this podcast, I really had it that I would interview African Americans born in the United States.
Uh-huh.
And in my mind, it was to the exclusion of immigrants who weren't actually born here. Mm-hmm. But as I was doing the podcast, I realized, since the impetus for this podcast is the next question about interactions with law enforcement, it's like when law enforcement pulls someone over, they don't know if you were born here, born in Jamaica, born, it's like you are Black. That's all. Again, assuming it's daytime. I've interviewed actual law enforcement, African Americans in law enforcement, and they say, when it's a nighttime stop, please don't assume that they could tell who you were. Now, maybe, but not always. So that aside, but if they are aware that they are pulling someone over because of race or ethnicity, fit the description, it doesn't matter where you're from, how you got here. And then the other thing that brings up for me is when we have these firsts, right? No one says President Barack Obama, first mixed race president. No one says first biracial president. They say first Black president, right? Yeah. And when I think of Colin Powell, even knowing that he is from Jamaican immigrants, it don't matter. First Black, right? So I just appreciate you kind of bringing that in, just so we can just own that, because I feel like sometimes we do distinguish. We have times when we distinguish this African American born here versus African Americans who aren't, right? And the way you're shaking your head is like, yes. Can you just say a little bit about that from your experience?
It's just sometimes sometimes it's just I find that little petty argument just kind of not necessary, because we're all basically from the same place regardless. It's just some of us landed in the West Indies, others went straight into the Americas. But at the end of the day, all this little bickering between us, that doesn't matter to the populace. They all see us as basically the same.
Yeah.
So when we look at each other, we shouldn't see, oh, you're from that place, I don't really like people from that place. No, we landed someplace else. Our background dictated how we move and how we act. So why shouldn't we continue to be one people that's working towards something better?
Yeah.
You know? So it's so I shake my head at that, because that little bickering between you're born in the US, you're born here, or you're straight from Africa, that doesn't matter to the general populace. They all see us as the same anyway. So why can't we do that with each other? It's just, let's learn from each other. Let's take certain cultures from each other and move forward to what we're all working for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're saying that, we're having this conversation as the first month of the Russian invasion of Ukraine is taking place. And, I know at the beginning, there was a lot of I won't speak for anybody else, but over here, I was kind of like, there are all these other wars that have been happening. Like, why is, which I do get, don't write me, because I already know, the difference is the possibility of going against Russia, which is a nuclear power. That's distinct from nations that are not nuclear fighting each other. That said, though, when you look at Europeans, when it's somebody against one, it's somebody against all, right? Anyway, that crossed my mind. And was there anything you wanted to say before I move on to the next question?
As you mentioned, Russia, I just wanted to add kind of like my 2 tech cents. So that whole thing is just basically a power play, because if you understand the tech field, everything works off of chips and semiconductors. So within the Ukraine, there is a chip manufacturing plant that manufactures actually 13% of the world's semiconductors and chips. So everything in the world runs on semiconductors and chips, our mobile phones, everything, etc. So the play is that what I feel is that he's trying to jump into the tech manufacturing market because he wants to control a little bit of that, because China in itself has a stockpile of rare earth minerals. And anybody who knows tech, you have to have these minerals to make these chips and semiconductors.
Right.
So since Russia only exports oil, he wants this semiconductor manufacturing plant to add to Russia's export. So therefore, he could kind of control the manufacturing and tech market from a manufacturing aspect.
Well, it's fun. I love that you said that, because they hint at it in the media, but they don't name it like you did, right? What they won't actually say what you said at all. What they will say is that, with these sanctions, Russia is losing access to the semiconductors and the chips and the things that make all of its electronics go. And when you hear that, then that means they don't have any control, right? But what I did not know, and thank you for sharing this, was that Ukraine has a chip manufacturing base where they control the production of about 13%. And if Russia could control that, I totally get it, they would not be dependent on the West and on China. And you want that independence. And the other thing is, just in terms of, economic strategy, as the globe is talking so much about going green, we have a need to shift something. And so right now, as you're saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, if they can anticipate, and Putin is an anticipator, a strategist, if he can anticipate that one of their, largest resources has a decades limit
Yep.
then you want to position yourself for something else. So yeah,
Exactly.
thank you. That's cool. See, that's why I like talking to you, because you learn different things. So now I'm going to ask you, what has been your experience with law enforcement? Either if you want to share, an experience or two, or what's there for you.
Throughout my life, I've only had one experience, but it was totally my fault when I look back at it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a situation where I bought a car from a friend and I didn't fully register it, and plus I was driving with a suspended license.
Okay.
So this is Westchester, New York.
Okay.
So I was driving through a neighborhood, and the police officer saw that I didn't have license plates on my car. So he pulled me over. There wasn't really any bad verbal exchange.
Yeah.
He just basically said, "Did you fully register the car?" I told him no, and then it's process and procedure. I was just in jail for a few hours so they could just do a background check. But again, it's totally my fault. So that's something I have to own and live with.
Yeah. And
But
is it routine? Is it routine to be taken to jail for a
um,
suspended license? And
well, if the car is not fully registered, they could see it as oh, this person's driving a stolen car. We need to kind of do background investigation, search the tags, make sure it's not reported stolen. But I look at it, it wasn't a bad experience as far as dealing with the police. It
yeah.
was just an experience on top of my that I have to kind of own. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. So, yeah.
Okay. The signature question: if the United States was a woman, whether she's a mother, lover, stranger, neighbor, friend, you choose. If the United States was a woman, what would you say to her?
I would definitely have a very intense heart to heart and say thank you for providing the resources for nourishing my curiosity, my career. But I would say you need to show off your prized possessions more. And what I mean by that is the world sees Black men as one thing, but we're much more than that. Some of us are top engineers and in companies. Some of us are, good lawyers, trial lawyers. Some of us are even shaping the world. You need to show us off more. Show the world that we're not that typical stereotype. We're out here help building America like everybody else. We're out here trying to shape the world like everybody else. You just need to show us off a little bit more. So it was.
I love that. I love hearing all the different ways brothers answer that question. From your answer, the choice in words, this idea of showing off, right? Yeah. With what you just said, I envision it gives me access to this vision of, well, let me contrast that. So currently it's so associated that it's white males, right?
Yeah.
Like that is who
Yep.
we present to the world as our
Exactly.
success stories.
Yep.
And women are like, hey, and, African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, there's so many different groups, right? That are doing some exceptional things. Yeah. And what I just got from your answer is, wow, like, sure, there's the idea of melting pot that's all over the world and everyone knows everybody can come here and, make their impact. But what if we actually showed the world the diversity of exceptionalism? Like we stand on that we are a nation of exceptionalism, right? But we don't own, and like you said, show off the diversity of exceptionalism and how that could inspire the world. Yeah, I really love that that's what you would say. because you're right, we don't.
Yeah, we don't. America sees majority of Black men as either entertainers, sports athlete. People like me are out there, but again, no one sees us. No one shows us off.
I do. Hey, and if you have a look, I'm gonna just say right now, you need to subscribe, because you need to know when I'm dropping another brother and what they're about. So subscribe. And also, if you enjoy what you hear, leave a review. Reviews and subscriptions help people go, oh, let me take a listen. And you're right on. I just had to jump in on that, but I'm gonna let you actually finish what you were saying.
No problem. Yeah, it's just where no one kind of shows us off. Like, we're the lawyer that's closing that billion-dollar deal, and we're that engineer at that company or a tech company that's actually shaping the world. So again, no one shows us off other than you. No one shows us off. So I think America just needs to show us off more. Like, hey, through my resources, my tools that I offer, these are who are helping build America. These Black men, these are who are helping. So, hey, these are my prize also.
Yeah, I love that. From your lips to full expression in the world. That would be awesome.
Thank you.
Let's talk about love. What is a moment that epitomizes or exemplifies love in a non-familial setting?
This is actually a tough one. I would have to say it would be a situation of maybe tough love type of thing.
Okay, that's fine.
Again, goes back to when I was a kid. I was in the kitchen with my mother. I don't remember exactly what I said to her, but I remember the after effect. I got a hard slap. It was one of those slaps that, your sister could feel, your siblings could feel.
Okay.
So, but I remember what she said after. It was just like, she said that I'm working hard to provide something better for you. And I want you to see that my hard work will force you to be better, force you to work harder than anybody else. And that stuck with me. I looked at it was it was a situation of kind of tough love, but I definitely still remember that slap. So it was,
yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Now, just so we're clear, though, mom is family, right?
Mom is family. Yeah.
So do you have a non-familial one?
I would say I don't, to be honest, I don't. Yeah.
Okay. No worries. Before, if there was no condition on it, like, non-familial. And then I found that so many of the answers, were either spouse, kids, and parent or ancestor. And so the goal was to kind of add some diversity. And that story was actually hella funny. The kind of slap, I remember that one, the kind of slap your sister could feel.
Yeah.
I hear you. Okay. I also get that that example being the one that stands out. It says so much. It's so consistent with your overarching message, and your answer to all the questions. It's really about working hard and, getting it done. So I can see where that was, it's consistent with that. That is definitely a theme. Let me ask you this question, which is a question just for this season. If you could spend 5 hours with another Black man, whether living or dead, who would it be? And what would you do, or what would you talk about?
I love this question. One of the most men that I truly admire is Malcolm X. If I had the chance to just sit down and talk with him, because we hear that saying that leaders are not born, they're made. I would love to sit down and kind of just, pick his brain and say, hey, what made you? You made yourself from the bottom to the top, and you had that force to just keep going. What was your drive? What was that burning desire in you? Pick his brain and just talk to him and just see what he was all about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now that we've had this conversation, I like to ask each brother, what did you learn about yourself or your life, or just something you learned from having this conversation?
What I've learned is that memories definitely impact your life. It actually pushes you towards your career, because going back and thinking about all the things, all the influences with computers I had with a child and stuff like that, it definitely shaped me, and it gave me that passion for my career that I'm still in. Because a lot of people actually do leave the industry because they just feel burnt out, or they just feel like they haven't made those strides that they need to within the industry. But I'm still in it 20 plus years now, and I'm still pushing forward.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Before we conclude, is there anything that you'd like to share with listeners about Nxus Cloud, and maybe how to reach you?
Sure. I started the company out of not so much of a frustration, but as of, I could do this job just as, my white counterpart can, and I could do it 10 times better. So I started a company to show the world who I am and what I could do, with more professionalism and more guidance and depth within the industry. Now we're in the era of, cybersecurity. For that small business, I could provide a better level of security than anybody else. My tools and solutions are at industry level. My philosophy is not to talk to the user like, hey, this is the latest product that's there. I try to show them why these products are necessary. Like we talked about that Russian-Ukraine invasion, but within the same news feed, you'll hear, oh, hackers broke into, the Russian email system and got all the emails of the generals, and we heard that.
Yeah.
I focus on providing a level of security for that small, medium-sized business, because small, medium-sized businesses are actually targets also. Hackers are actually targeting them. I'm able to provide services for Microsoft 365. I'm actually a Microsoft 365 partner, so I could sell that to small, medium-sized businesses. I'm that IT guy or that IT company. I will tell you what is necessary for your business, not trying to make a big sale or something. This is what's needed for your company.
Yeah. I'm dying to ask this. Okay.
Yes.
So this last thing, I think I just know so much. And I'd be watching the news like, I know what's going on behind the scenes. So, okay. So before the Russian invasion, there was a bunch of helicopters in the United States that crashed, right? And you may not actually know that. I'm not asking I'm not asking you to validate or say this true, but I guess I just want to share it with somebody who understands computers and then hear what you think. Okay, so there are all these, there were these helicopters that fell, a couple Black Hawks. I think that was in Utah. And then there was one in Hawaii at one of the sites that does like the highest level of missile training, something to do with long range missile training. And then I was looking stuff up because that's what I do. And I saw that Russia, like a few months back, was starting to go into remote. They were testing out remote control of helicopters. And I was like, did those helicopters get hacked? And so since you work in cybersecurity, is that something that could happen?
I actually didn't hear that in the news, but that is actually a true thing. There is a company that's called Solar Wind. They have a lot of military contracts and government contracts. They were actually broken into, but they still haven't figured out what was actually stolen. But they know that they were actually breached and data was actually stolen. So that's the whole thing about cybersecurity. It's not like the movies, like everybody thinks. A hacker breaks in 5 minutes, takes data, and then he's gone. No, he could be in there for months, 6 months. And that time he or she could be taking anything and you don't even know.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful personally for people like yourself who make sure that small and medium-sized firms are secure, because let's be honest, like I do, buy a lot of stuff online at big companies like Amazon and through Etsy and things like that. But I also do buy things from small to medium-sized firms. And all that information I'm providing, I would like it to be secure. So, I do appreciate the work that you provide, and always appreciate brothers who are entrepreneurs in these areas in the computer and security world.
Thank you.
So I'm always left with a particular impression of each brother. And I know the obvious thing to say about you is that you're hardworking, right? And determined. But there's something else, which is you are such a steady progressor. There's, yes, you're a hard worker, and yes, you're going to get it done. But the thing that's kind of in the background is just that you are a steady progress. Like it's just in the background of everything you're saying. It's like, yes, you're going to work hard, but there are people who work hard in spurts. Right.
Yeah.
And people who have, they work really hard in a particular area, and then that's their area of success, and everything else is whatever. But it's so clear about you that you are the, if they talk about the tortoise and the hare, you're that tortoise. You're the tortoise and the hare, because you're getting it done, but you're still very steady. So I acknowledge you for being someone who is steady in his being effective, steady in his level of production, steady in your level of performance. And I think that's the kind of entrepreneur everybody is interested in doing business with. So
thank you.
Remember, you can follow us on Instagram at 365 Brothers. Also, follow us on Facebook at 365 Brothers, the podcast. Lastly, I just want to let you know, producing a podcast, it takes something, and I'm really grateful to have partnered with alitu.com. They make publishing easy. There's a link in the show notes for anyone who either has a podcast or is thinking about a podcast. You don't need to learn all that sound balancing and compression. Save all that. Use your time for what matters, interviewing and sharing the stories that your podcast brings. Thank you for listening to 365 Brothers. I certainly hope you enjoyed the episode. I encourage you to subscribe. Please leave a review. I want to know what you think. Also, if you know someone who would be a fantastic guest for 365 Brothers, please direct them to our website, 365brothers.com. You'll also find all the episodes there, 365brothers.com, and your support is welcome. And remember, to listen is to love.